Before we get to episode 162 and my interview with Emily, I have this brief message for you. Please support the Keystone chapter of the National Federation of the Blind of Pennsylvania. Go to supportkeystonechapter.org, scroll down, and in the text field, put in any amount you like. Any amount. I am not kidding. This is episode 162, so why not donate $1.62? Or you could donate $162. That would be okay too. But any amount is great, and we would really appreciate it. That's supportkeystonechapter.org. I really appreciate your help, and thank you so much.
From Studio B in Swarthmore, this is the iCantCU podcast with David. It's like blind people for dummies.
Hello there, and welcome to episode 162 of the iCantCU podcast. My name is David, at David Benj on all the socials. I really appreciate you joining me for today's episode, and I've got a great one lined up today because it's more than just me talking. We'll get to Emily in a minute or two, but before we get to Emily, I did want to bring this update for those that care, and I know Frank is probably listening, so he cares. It is a fantasy hockey update. And who likes fantasy hockey more than Frank and I? I don't know. I'm sure there's others in our league that do. Frank beat me last week. He is the Ice Pugs. The thing that really stinks about last week's match between Frank and I would have beaten any other team in the league last week except Frank. And I happen to be playing Frank, so that kind of sucked. I fell, as I said last week, if I lost, I fell from first to fourth because there's a bunch of us with the same records, but I have a lot less points. COVID has ravaged my team, although I found out today that I did get a couple of players back, Claude Giroux and Connor McDavid. Very excited about that. So I'm playing the Blind Flyers today. I'm not quite sure if they are in the Philadelphia area or not. Are they just like the Orange and Black, or they are a pilot or used to be a pilot and are now blind, or still a pilot and flying blind? I think there's an expression there somewhere. But like I said, I'm fourth, and still a lot of fun. The COVID stuff I could do without, and I'm sure everybody in the league would agree. Juggling the roster and the injured reserve list looking like a CVS receipt as long as they are. But teams are starting to come around, and less games seem to be getting postponed. So hopefully that will work out as we move forward. And while we're talking about sports, and this is why I brought it up in the first place, because this is a sports-centric episode today. Because, the holidays are done, which of course you know. I think everybody knows. And it is time to concentrate on winter sports. Football season is in the playoffs, which is very cool. Winter Olympics are coming up, hockey, and I guess to a lesser degree basketball, if you care for basketball much. I mean, I like the Sixers, don't get me wrong. It's just not my sport that I would watch very often. But Emily, who is going to join us now, is a blind snowboarder. And I thought it would be very cool to have her on with the Olympics coming up and the Paralympics just after the Olympics in Beijing. And the Paralympics will be in Beijing also from the 4th to the 13th of March. And Emily and I talk about that. Emily is based in British Columbia now, where she trains. And I just think it is amazing to think about going down the hill at however fast they go, whether you measure it in kilometers per hour or miles per hour, it's still fast, and I think I would be scared to death to do it right now. If I could see a little better, maybe, but because I still, at 57 years old, have trouble with my right and my left, I don't think there could be enough coaching and people telling me which way to go. That would be okay. So please welcome to the iCantCU podcast, Emily Trepanier, and she is joining us from British Columbia. Emily, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me on.
It is really great to speak with you today, and I appreciate you coming on. And to let the folks know, we were introduced by mutual friend Max Ivy, the blind blogger. He's been helping you with your podcast, and I thought it would be a cool idea with the Winter Olympics and the Paralympics coming up to get you on, because how many people know about blind snowboarders? I certainly didn't until Max brought that to my attention, and I actually saw the postings in Facebook and whatnot. But before we get into the podcast and the snowboarding in general, why don't we go into a little bit of your backstory? Were you born visually impaired or blind, or did that develop over your lifetime? Give us a little background on your visual impairment and how you've handled that.
For sure. So I was actually born totally blind. So they only figured out something was going on at around age 2. And it was actually not even the doctors that had noticed it at first. It was actually my mom who had noticed that I was only staring at lights. I wouldn't stare at any objects or anything. And so she's like, there's something wrong. There's something wrong here. There's something not quite right. So she brought me to the doctors and explained what was going on. And at first, the doctors were like, no, everything's okay. It's just what she's doing. Nothing's wrong. And my mom's like, no, there's definitely something wrong because she's only staring at lights. She won't like focus on any object, even when we like give an object to her. She won't focus on anything. Whereas I am the youngest of 2 other sisters and 1 brother. And so my brothers and sisters, they obviously would be like playing with different objects and like not just like focusing on with lights. So my mom knew right then and there that there was something wrong. But it took the doctors a little while to be convinced that something was wrong. So eventually they did end up doing a whole bunch of different tests just to like see if they could find anything. And it was determined that I was actually indeed legally blind. I have underdeveloped optic nerves. So basically they didn't develop properly at birth. And so they were slow to develop. And the one hasn't like fully developed fully. And the other one has developed, but it's not like properly developed. So that's what's caused my like the main portion of my legal blindness. So I actually gained a bunch of vision as I got a little bit like older. I would say like when I was like 5 or 6, I had a bunch more vision. I remember having a bunch more vision at that time. And then I got glasses, and it was just like learning to like work with the vision that I had. And just like I was still in like the public school system at the time and had like one-on-one support from a bunch of people to like get me through schooling. And then I would say about age 9 or 10, I started losing a little bit more of vision, and they weren't 100% sure why at the time. And they're still not really 100% sure why. But I ended up losing a bunch of vision in my left eye. And so I only have vision in my right eye now, and it's close up. But I had a bunch of vision when I was younger, and then it just like slowly has disappeared over many years. So it was around that same time when I was 9 or 10 that they decided it would be best for me to go to a school for the visually impaired back in Ontario, Canada, where I was living. They had the choice of sending me when I was at the age of 6, but my mom and dad didn't think it was the right time for me to be going, and they weren't really sure how well I would do there, because I was really much, when I was younger, I really liked to be close to family and close to the home. So they weren't really sure how that was going to go if suddenly they send me to a school, because this school, you actually stay there during the week and then just go home on the weekends. So you can imagine someone who's 6 years old who likes to stay at home and likes to be with family.
Right.
It might not work so well, right? So, but then once they realized that I was starting to struggle in like the school system that I was a part of, and the fact that I could be losing a little bit more vision, they decided to try out the school. And honestly, it was a really good experience going to that school. Suddenly I got more support that I needed, and I was able to like learn so much at that school. Still went through like all of the schooling that like a person who isn't blind would go through, which just was like slightly different taught, obviously, because everyone at the school is either blind or visually impaired or had some vision, right? So yeah, so that's so I've always been blind.
Okay.
So that's a little bit of the longer answer.
Okay. No, that's okay. And I just, before we move on, was it easier when you went to that school as far as friends go, because the kids at the school kind of knew where you were coming from, as opposed to when you were in the public school? Just like today, I have friends that, just some of them don't get that, hey, the bathroom's right over there. And, of course they're pointing somewhere, and, I don't know what they're pointing at. And even, so was it easier?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the short answer is, yeah, it's so much easier when I went to the school where every one of us was either visually impaired or blind, because suddenly we were all on the same field, right? We were all dealing with the same things, even though the level of blindness was different from from person to person. But I feel like it was easier to connect with the friends that I made and all the people that I met at the school, because they, like you said, they get it, right? And it's just, it works so much easier. I will say though that when I did end up graduating from the school, transitioning to post-secondary school, so like college and university, actually ended up being a lot easier. It was a regular college and university, but it was a lot easier because I had learned a bunch of skills going to the school for the blind. And so I was able to take those skills and use them in post-secondary. And so it made it easier then. But I feel like if I didn't go to that school and I stayed in the regular school system and then transition to post-secondary from there, I feel like it would be a lot harder because I wouldn't have all the skills that I learned at the school for the blind. So yeah, it does make it a lot easier.
And I'm guessing that would have been, you may have gotten those skills, but that would have been that would have had to have been gotten outside of your regular schooling. It would have been, in addition to your regular school.
It would have been a lot. I feel like it would look a lot differently. So.
Okay. And how did you, were you always interested in sports? How did you get interested in snowboarding and any other sports that you may be interested in?
Yeah, so when I was really young, I always loved it when the Olympics came on the TV.
Okay.
Especially for whatever reason, the Winter Olympics. So I would literally be asking my family when it would be coming on. Okay. And I would literally glue myself right in front of the TV so that I could try to see what was happening on the TV. And remember my mom saying that if you sat too close to the TV, you're going to make things worse for your eyes. And I'm I didn't care. So I always snuck in when everybody was not watching. And I would still sit super close to the TV because I wanted to see what was happening.
Right.
I was so curious. And I always thought that it would be super cool to be one of those athletes who were competing at the Olympics. And so that's sort of my first taste of it. Okay. And then when I went to the school for the blind in my second year, I met my best friend, who we are still best friends, even though we're almost 5,000 miles apart now. She had been part of a special program called the Track 3 program since she was 4 years old. And basically that program teaches people with disabilities how to ski and snowboard.
Oh, wow.
So she had been a part of that program, and she was telling me a little bit about it, and it sounded really interesting to me. So they invited me to come check it out one night, and I fell in love. I was so happy at being at the hill and on the snow and stuff that I ended up applying to be one of their students for the next season. Okay. And so I actually started out as a skier.
Okay.
And then the one night my guide ended up getting injured, not on the hill, but outside of the program. He ended up getting injured. And so my best friend actually had 2 guides at the time. And so they were like, well, since your guide isn't here, do you want to try out snowboarding? I'm like, sure, why not? What's the worst that could happen? And I tried it out and absolutely fell in love with it and haven't gone back to skiing since. So,
Oh, wow. Okay. And so how does how do you actually do snowboarding? Are you tethered, or is someone near you saying, "Hey, go"? There's an old movie called Better Off Dead, and there's a scene in the movie where they're at the top of the mountain, and this one girl who's supposedly from France. The guy's afraid to go skiing down this giant, I guess it was Black Diamond, whatever. And she's like, "What's so hard? You go this way, then go that way, then go this way." And, doing it with a French accent. And she said, it's not hard. Here's how you do it. And then she just did it. And, is that what it's like? Is somebody, either in front or I guess behind you telling you, okay, go left a little? How does it work?
So that's a really good question. So, in the beginning, they had me tethered, but that only lasted like less than an hour because we were finding the tether was actually creating more issues than what it should have been. So we quickly got rid of the tether. But I always have two people with me when I'm going down the hill.
Okay.
At the very least one person, but we try always for two people. That way the one person can focus on guiding me and the other person can focus on watching what's going on around me to make sure like people aren't going to run into me.
Okay.
Because there are people out there who don't know sometimes how to like go down the hill properly and safely. So we've got to run into a few times, but thankfully everyone has survived, so that's good.
Right.
So yeah, I always have someone either in front of me, beside me, or behind me.
And
then we actually use special headsets that go in our helmets. And so it's like a two-way system, so we're constantly talking to each other, so I can talk to them, they can talk to me. And then we have like specific words that we use to help with guiding me down the mountains and stuff. So it's like a special language that I've worked on with all of my coaches over the years that I've been training and racing. And so that's what we use to get down the hill. And then we also wear bright orange neon vests that mine says Blind Rider, and my guides have guides on them, just so people are aware that I am blind going down the hill. So hopefully they will watch out for me.
So what you're saying is you're not going down the same time as other blind folks are going down. I mean, I guess it could happen, but usually not.
When I'm training, it's possible that it could happen. But there's always like people that are dedicated just to guiding me down the hill. When I'm racing, I don't go down with other people when I'm racing. So, but when I'm training, it's very possible that there's other blind people going down the hill at the same time. But they would have their own team, and I would have my own team. So. Yeah.
Okay. And so talking about racing, I did notice that there are three snowboard events in the Paralympics, and there's the cross, the snowboard cross, and then the I forget the one, the giant slalom, and then there was another slalom,
and then slalom.
Bank slalom. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So which one do you participate in? All? Are you trying for all, or?
I am working on giant slalom. So, snowboarding only started at the Paralympics in 2014. So the sport is very much in its developmental stage right now. So not all the classifications are into the Paralympics right now quite yet. They're still being developed and worked on. So my classification is actually still being developed and being worked on, but they've made quite a bit of progress so far. So fingers crossed. And there's been a lot of momentum that's been happening to get my category into the Paralympics. So we're just, and then when the pandemic hit, it kind of delayed things a whole bunch of, things are kind of a little bit behind of schedule what they should be, but it's a work in progress.
Okay.
and there's exciting things coming up. I can't fully say what those are yet because I don't 100% know yet. I'm
Okay.
just told that there's big things coming up for the sport of para snowboarding, and it's coming. So we're just trying to be a bit more patient and just working through it one day at a time.
Okay.
My specialty and the one that I'm working on is giant slalom. So
okay. Now I noticed when I was looking at the different events that there are subcategories, and I'm guessing that's what you're talking about with your. I noticed that if there's an upper body issue or a lower body issue. So and I'm thinking, I wonder how that works for someone who is blind, because obviously your legs are good, your arms are good. It's you just can't see. Not that makes it easier or harder. It just makes it different.
Yeah. There's definitely subcategories, and that's what the classifications are. That's what I was referring to.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that folks are basically, you're competing against each other, but it's basically a timed event. Like
basically,
most.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a timed event. That being said, I have raced against like different categories before.
Okay.
So I've actually raced against someone who's using like a sit ski and me blind, but we're not like on the race course at the same time, obviously.
Okay.
But yeah, we try to do it so like it's all in the same category, but sometimes just depending on who's at the races and stuff, it just all depends. So
okay. As far as snowboarding in general in the Olympics, I'm guessing, and I've never, with sports like hockey or football or soccer or whatever, when you listen on the radio, it's very descriptive. Now, I've never, Olympic sport wise, I've never listened on the radio where it's, you have it on TV and, somebody could be going down the hill skiing, whatever it is, and you have no idea, oh, they made a good turn there. And meanwhile, they're talking about, something else that the person has done, or, they live in wherever and with their husband or their wife or whatever. So it's hard to follow. Is there, when you watch now, is there a way that you can follow? Do you watch it on TV, or is there radio coverage that you listen that may be a little bit more descriptive?
It's gotten better over the years, and they're starting to do more like descriptive video.
Okay.
In certain places where you can like listen to it and like watch it on TV.
Okay.
I know they definitely didn't do that a lot. Like a while ago, they weren't doing that. So I think it's starting, and I think they're doing that for both the Olympics and the Paralympics now. I don't know if they're doing it fully yet, but I know they've started doing that.
Okay.
One of the places that I really like to watch stuff like that is I think the website is called Paralympic TV.
Okay.
But I don't know the website off the top of my head because I don't have to use it except for when like the Olympics and the Paralympics come along. But I can
every 4 years, right?
yeah. So I don't know it off the top of my head, but I believe it's called Paralympic TV.
Okay.
Or if you can also look, I think it's called Paralympic TV. I think that's like the general one.
Okay, I'll take a look and I'll put something in the show notes with the link to that if I can find that out. So that's
okay.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I can always look because I think I have it written down somewhere.
Okay.
I obviously use it, right?
Okay. Yeah, it's I was thinking about that because I also love the Winter Olympics. I love and the snowboard racing and stuff like that. And
it's
for
so
some
cool.
reason, it's just, especially the one, and I don't know what it's called, where, and again, I also have a little bit of sight, and to me it looked like chaos on the side of a mountain where there's like six people going down at one time, and you see guys flying over other people, and I'm thinking, oh my God, if that guy stood up, he'd have a snowboard right in his ear. I mean,
I forget what that's called. I think it's like a snowboard relay or snowboard cross relay or something like that.
Yeah, just so cool. I just love that, and I never remember when it was. And, now that coming up in a few weeks with the Olympics coming on, and, finally the talking guide on, our cable system now works. So I'll be able to get the description of all the events that are going to be on. So now I'll be able to hopefully find it and,
you might
and
even
watch
be
that.
able to do descriptive video for your TV guide then.
Right.
Try that.
Right. And that's something that, it's very hit or miss, with TV shows and talking to a friend, even from in one series, one episode will have descriptive audio and then the next one won't. There's just no rhyme or reason. And it's very frustrating when you can't, it's fine. It's fine when you're watching with someone who is sighted, assuming they stay awake to watch the whole episode with you.
But if they fall asleep,
I can't tell you how many times with my wife I'm like, Liz, what does that say, or what's going on right now, and she's sleeping and I got to rewind it, and I say, come on, Liz, what is that? So
or when they start talking in a different language and there's like the subtitles in the bottom of like the screen and you're like, I can't read that, what does that say? What are they saying?
Right. I've gotten to the point where sometimes I will pull out my phone and either use Seeing AI or Envision and just pause it, because we have the DVR, so I will just pause it, and then just use that if I really want to know. If it's something like, if I watch another 5 minutes and I'm like, wait, why is that happening, and then I'll go back and then I'll say, I better see what this guy said. That is very cool that about the Olympics and the Paralympics with snowboarding.
It's exciting. It's a very exciting time.
Yes.
The pandemic definitely delayed a lot of things, but now that we're getting back to some normalcy, things are starting to move forward now. So it's very exciting.
Right. Now, I noticed when I heard you on Outlook on Radio Western, you had talked about you were living in Ontario and you moved to British Columbia. Was that for training or just a general lifestyle move?
Yeah. So I used to live in Ontario, and so I moved to British Columbia a little over a year and a half ago. That's a lot of my training has actually, over the last few years especially, have been out west here in British Columbia. So it made sense to move closer to the area where I was training, because when I was living in Ontario, I would have to go to British Columbia for weekend training or weekday training and then go back to Ontario, which gets really expensive really, really quickly. And the time change as well. It's tricky to figure out, especially when you're only going there for a short period of time. So it made sense just to move closer to where the training was and more of the opportunities were, because I had been training in Ontario and I was racing in Ontario, but it was only a small bit of training and racing. But the bigger opportunities and get to work towards my goal, the next step was getting out west and training with the people here out west. So it just made sense to move out there. And then I was also offered a full-time permanent position with one of the school boards out here. So it was meant to be. So
there you go. Now, did you move out on your own, or did family move out with you, or you do it independently?
I moved out on my own. I did have family support that helped move all of my stuff from Ontario to BC.
Okay.
So it's me and Darling that are living in our apartment.
Okay. So. And how did she do with the move? Did she do okay with the move?
She was fine with the move. Yeah, I'm so lucky. Both of my dogs have done so well with my active, busy and lifestyle, and even the transition from Ontario to British Columbia. She did fine. She is actually originally from California, so this is more of the climate that would have been used to anyways growing up as a pup. So she's been fine with it. Totally fine. She loves going to the beach and loves going to the mountains and stuff. So she's good. She loves it. Yeah.
Now, are you so? And that's one thing I have to tell you, that when things were going a little haywire here in the US year and a half or so ago, right after the pandemic started with all the rioting and stuff that happened a little bit after that. I started to think, where, if we needed to leave, if we, if things really went crazy, where would we go? And, I've always wanted to move to where it's warm and, beachy. And I thought, but, you can't, there was, very little air traffic and, maybe you could at least go into Canada. And I started looking at places, easy place to drive would of course be, I'm on the East Coast. So would be, Ontario, Quebec, the Maritimes and whatnot. And one of the funniest things that I saw, and it haunts me to this day because I thought I didn't notice it at first as I was looking at different places, and the exchange between, US dollars and Canadian dollars, you kind of get a bonus, with the US dollar. But one of the things that really, I don't want to say scared me, there was on every listing, average days above 20 degrees per year. And, the most I think I ever saw was like 120. And if you're listening in the US, 120 is 68 degrees Fahrenheit. So I want to move to where it's warm. And yet I'm looking at something that says maybe at best, the most days you're going to get above 68 degrees is 1/3 of the year. The other 2/3 is going to be below. And I thought, I just can't do it. I just can't.
You should move to the West Coast of Canada then.
Well, and I looked, that's what I said to my wife, because I've never been out west to
it's beautiful.
And it's beautiful. I looked at places on Vancouver Island and I thought, man, this looks great. But then again, I saw that average days above 20 and I saw, 107, 114. And I'm like, it's just, okay, and then I was reading on some boards. Yeah, you get to go to the beach like 3.5 weeks a year.
No,
because that's you never gonna want to go in the water because it's always chilly out and it does. And
always go for beach walks and stuff though.
Yeah, right, exactly, right. And that's and the one thing that I thought was very interesting there, was the proximity of both the beach and the mountains within a very short distance.
Yeah, it's awesome. So I have the ocean close by. And so in the summer months, I actually do stand-up paddleboarding as my cross-training sport.
Okay.
And so I have the ocean close by. So that's awesome. And then I have mountains close by. And it's really easy to get to the mountains as well. So it's like the best of both worlds. And so I'm living in mainland where usually the weather is fairly... in the wintertime, it does get rainy here in the mainland, but usually when it's raining in the mainland, it's like crazy snowing in the mountains that are close by. So it's fine.
Okay. So you talked about cross training with the paddleboarding. Do you ever do skateboarding? Have you ever done that?
I want to try skateboarding actually, and I want to try longboarding.
Okay.
I haven't tried either of those yet, but that's on my list of things to do.
Okay. Okay. And as far as while you're training, whether it's summer or winter, I'm guessing you're training with other folks who have similar ambitions, Paralympics and things like that. So you're getting friendly with.
So in the summer months, I privately train actually.
Okay.
With my coaches.
Okay.
And that's for stand-up paddleboarding and for all the land-based training, so the gym training and the yoga stuff. So I actually do it privately. And then in the winter months, it's a little bit more with people because I'm part of the different race teams. So there are other people that are training as well. So yeah. Okay.
With all of that, what was with the training and you started a podcast? And was that so folks could follow along and you could kind of tell your story about how things or why don't you talk a little about the podcast?
Yeah. So about it. So a few years ago, I actually heard of something called the Holmen Prize, and it's run through the Lighthouse for the Blind in San Francisco, California.
Right.
And so basically what it is for the listeners who don't know what it is, or even for you, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Holmen Prize or not.
Yes.
It's basically you can apply if you're blind, and It's basically if you have a dream or ambition to do something or to make something, you can apply for special funding. And if you are chosen as one of the 3 people, they will essentially give you a whole bunch of money for a year, and they'll help you get whatever it is you want to work on into more like a reality.
Okay.
So I had learned about the Holmen Prize a few years ago, and I thought it would be kind of interesting to apply to, just to get some more funding.
Okay.
And my original plan was to actually make a website, because with Paris snowboarding, and from what my experience was as I was getting to like be more serious with Paris snowboarding and like wanting to really compete at the Paralympics and be like a high performance athlete. One of the things I noticed as I was getting there is the resources that you have as an athlete. They're out there, but it's not like all in one area. So my plan was to like create a website where we could put all of the information, instead of it being some of this in one website and another in a different website.
Okay.
It'd be all in one area. So it'd be all in one. It'd be a lot easier for, say, an athlete who was just starting out and looking up information and wanting to learn more about it. They wouldn't have to like do a whole bunch of like research and to figure out where they need to look. Instead, they could just go to this website and they could like search it up, and
Okay.
it would be right there for them. So it'd just be a little bit easier for them to look, like get the information that they needed. Because
Okay.
that was the one thing that I noticed when I started out, but it took me a long time to find a bunch of information and the resources that I needed. So my original plan was to apply to the Holmen Prize, and so that I could gain money to create a website to help the sport of Paris snowboarding, and also to like network more people to get more to help discover more Paris snowboarders out there, especially blind Paris snowboarders, because that's where they're really wanting to develop right now. They're constantly looking to see where they are at because they're out there, but they just haven't been like fully discovered yet. So I applied for the Holmen Prize and ended up making it as a semi-finalist.
Okay.
And so in order to apply for the Holmen Prize, you have to make a 90-second video, and you have to put it on YouTube, and it sort of like explains what you would be using the money for. It's sort of like a pitch video,
Okay.
if you will. And so they were all up on YouTube. And then Max also had applied to the Holmen Prize to help create the WY Excuse Network, because he wanted to help make a podcasting network for new podcasters that had disabilities. So that was his sort of like thing that he wanted to use the money for. So we both ended up being semi-finalists, but unfortunately neither of us were finalists. And then he was watching like the pitch videos on YouTube and found me and then reached out to me. And so we started talking about each of our goals, and Max was like, well, why don't you make a podcast and like share your adventures of how you are doing and like how the sport of Paris snowboarding is like growing and what things are happening in the sport of Paris snowboarding, so that more people could learn about the sport, and maybe they'd be interested in being, if they're blind, if they'd be interested in being like a snowboarder or becoming a Paris snowboarder, or if there's someone out there who wants to help the sport of Paris snowboarding, they could reach out and help out in some way, shape, or form. So that was kind of how the podcast was born. So
okay, gotcha. And just so folks, Max that she's speaking about is Max Ivy, the blind blogger. Yeah, and Max and I had met. Max has been on a couple of times. We met a couple of years ago.
Awesome.
Yeah, he's he talk about networking. He is great at that, and
he is.
And it's it was just amazing to be around him when we were in Orlando together a few years ago, and watching him work. I am terrible at networking. I will not go up to people. It's very challenging to me to, sometimes I walk up to someone and somebody might start talking and I might think they're talking to me, but meanwhile there's somebody else there they're talking to. So I'm always nervous about that. And I have a couple of friends who are blind that, have no problem walking up to somebody and just, kind of basically blocking their way. Hey, could you tell me what this street sign says here, or what this is, or what that is?
Mhm.
And I am just not that way. And he is great at the networking and
He is, yeah.
getting, doing outreach and everything else. So that is
Definitely.
great. So
he's been opening up a lot of doors for me since we started working together. So I'm
that's
really
awesome.
happy that I found him. So
yeah, that is awesome. So you launched the podcast. What is the podcast called?
the podcast is called Shredding for Gold.
Okay.
And you can find it at www.shreddingforgold.com.
Okay. And I'm assuming you're on, besides being on the What's Your Excuse network, you're on Apple and Spotify and those sorts.
I'm not sure if we're on Spotify yet. I know that's a work in progress.
Okay.
I haven't checked in the last few weeks to see if it's up yet. I know that was being worked on.
Okay.
But we're definitely on Apple. We're definitely on Google. Definitely on a few other spaces. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think when I listened, as I mentioned, when I heard you on Outlook, I think I pulled it down from Apple because that's where I usually listen, where I grab them.
Yeah.
So
it's definitely on Apple.
and how have you liked doing it?
I love it.
Okay.
I absolutely love it. I feel like I'm getting better each time I do an episode. I feel like I'm getting more comfortable and confident and just like getting into it seems to get easier each time I do an episode. And I really like it. We've had some feedback already and it seems like everyone seems to be liking it thus far. So definitely have lots of plans for the podcast in the future. We're getting some Paralympians who are snowboarders on the podcast. I'm just working on that actually right now.
Okay. So
it's been fun though. It's definitely a new experience, but I feel like it's gonna really help. It's gonna take a bit of time, but I mean, we only started it in September, right? And we've already started getting lots of followers from different areas already. So that's pretty exciting to see that. So
right, and that's one thing that I think is funny that I know when I first started with this podcast, I didn't think that somebody from, some faraway country was going to listen. And so I would always just talk, in generalities, either around, where I live in suburban Philadelphia, or, the US in general. And, and somebody had emailed me from Italy and some people had contacted me from India. And I thought,
oh,
wow, this is crazy. I never imagined somebody from there would find it interesting. But again, there's always something that somebody's interested in, and you just don't know until you get it out there. And,
exactly, yeah.
And that is very cool. So
it is really cool, yeah.
Yeah,
it's been fun so far.
Yeah, I wish you luck with the podcast. And how about I know you also have another website, and I was actually looking at that. Max had posted on Facebook, and I a while back, and I remember looking. Why don't you talk about that other website?
Yeah, so I have the podcasting website, and then I also have the Team Starfish website, which is I've had that website for a long time, but we've done a huge revamp of the website. So the podcasting website is specifically podcast stuff.
Okay.
The Team Starfish website just sort of describes my personal journey towards the Paralympics a little bit more.
Okay.
It gives you the type of training that I'm doing. It gives you what that type of training looks like. We're currently doing a whole bunch of updates on the website right now, but it is live now again. It's called www.teamstarfish.ca, and we have done a lot of we've basically started from the bottom up with the website.
Okay.
So there's not a whole lot of information on the website yet, but there there's going to be a whole bunch more information coming on that website very, very soon. So
Okay. Now, are you doing that? Do you do the editing of that site, or do you just
I do the
content?
editing for the
Okay.
I do the editing for the Team Starfish website, and then
Okay.
Max is doing all the editing for the podcast website.
Okay.
For me, yeah.
Okay. All right. Very cool. That is very cool. So, and I'm assuming that if somebody wanted to reach out to you besides the websites, where could they find you? Are you on social media at all?
I am on social media. I have Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, but I guess like the best way to get a hold of me on social media is through the Team Starfish page on Facebook.
Okay.
Or they can also email me, which I can give as well.
Okay.
So you can add that to the description.
Okay. Oh, that'll be great. Okay. Is there anything that I haven't covered that you'd like to talk about?
I just want to say like thank you to everyone who has been like supporting me, and thank you for having me on this podcast. It definitely means a lot to like get my name out there and just like network with more people out in the big wide world. So
Right.
I just want to thank you.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome, and it has been a pleasure to have you on. And again, I'll have all the information for Emily's contact info in the show notes. And this will be this podcast is going to be the iCantCU podcast, episode 162. The show notes will be at iCantCU.com/162. So, Emily, I do appreciate your time today, and thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Thanks so much to Emily for coming on and sharing her story. What a great story it is, and how awesome would that be to see her up on the podium. So, Max, I guess you better learn the words to "O Canada," because I know you'll sing it better than I when she is receiving her gold medal either in a few weeks' time or in 4 years if it's not this year's Paralympics. And we really look forward to watching Emily compete in the Paralympics. And again, very excited about it for her. And I would love to go snowboarding like 15 years ago. Not today. So thanks again, Emily. I do appreciate it. If you want to check out the show notes for all the information that we've talked about, iCantCU.com/162. Remember, iCantCU sounds like a whole sentence, but it's only 7 characters long. iCantCU.com/162. And you'll find all of Emily's contact information, both her websites, her Facebook group, and stuff like that there. If you want to reach out to me, if you've got a show idea or you've got comments, good or bad, it's okay. I can take it. You could swear if you want. Whatever you want to do, please reach out. 646-926-6350. You have up to 3 minutes. Please leave your name and town. If you do leave a message, I would appreciate that. You can also reach out via email, iCantCUpodcast@gmail.com, iCantCUpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening to episode 162 of the iCantCU podcast. I really do appreciate it. I hope you're staying safe and you're well, and I'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the I Can't See You podcast with David. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen. And don't forget to share the podcast with your friends.